सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
If you ask me when is it that a democracy looks really good, my first answer to you would be, I can give you a list of answers, but my first answer would be when its parliament does its job, which means parliament functions, does its job. And we saw a bit of that today, and that is what has enabled us to bring to you this episode of Cut the Clutter. So in Parliament, two Congress MPs, that is Ravneet Singh Bittu and Pradyut Bardoloi, they asked a set of questions from the government. And these were about the state of non-performing assets, NPAs, bad loans, and loan write-offs in our banking system. So you will see written answers have been given. You will see a screenshot, right? And I will share with you the full reply that the minister gave. In this case, the Minister of State for Finance, Bhagwat Karad. Now, this gives us the gyan. And this gyan then helps us answer some of the questions that have been sort of buzzing in our minds for a long time. Bank loans, bad loans, NPAs, write-off, 10 lakh crore write-off. Governments keep on writing off loans to the rich and keep going after people like us who might have borrowed money to buy a house or buy maybe a car or a motorbike and are not able to pay, right? So then bank agents come to repossess it, the rich get away because banks write it off. So we are now trying to answer some of these questions with data that the minister has given us in Parliament today and some understanding by talking to some experts. In my case, also to one who I consider guru of Indian banking, which is Tamal Bandyopadhyay, among our senior most and most respected banking editors. So I called him and tried to get some gyan from him. So what are the questions on our minds? Ye kya hua? Kaise hua? Kab hua? Kyun hua? Sound familiar to you? Famous Kishore Kumar song from Amar Prem. It also came to me, see how you associate one thing with the other. I've been trying to read up on banking and bad loans and write-offs and all these contentious issues, while at the same time, I've been reading this wonderful book on Kishore Kumar, the ultimate biography by Anirudh Bhattacharya and Parthiv Dhar, my favorite author. So you know how much I love Hindi film music and how I look for props either in Hindi film music or in sport all the time. So in this case, Ye kya hua, kaise hua, kab hua, kyun hua, about the crisis in Indian banking sector. So what does the minister tell us? The minister said that in 2017-18, this is the Ram Katha of the past 5 years. In 2017-18, total NPAs in the Indian banking system were 8,95,601 crores. These are gross NPAs. Now, I will tell you the difference between gross and net thanks to Tamal. Gross NPAs is all those people who've not paid you the installment of their loan. I think these norms keep changing for 1 quarter or 2 quarters. RBI keeps changing these norms. That loan then has to be classified as non-performing asset. This can change the next quarter if one installment comes in. So this is very fluid. So gross NPAs in 2017-18 were 8,95,000 crores. Now they are 5,40,958 crores. They've been declining over the past 5 years, and you will see a chart on my screen that explains that to you. So gross NPAs have declined. They were earlier 14.58% of our banking loans. Today they are 7.28%. 7.28 is also very high and needs a lot of fixing. Now the question is, and the question that the Congress MPs also asked, that look, NPAs have come down, but how have they come down? Have they come down because you've just been writing them off? The fact is, a lot has been written off also. So see how much has been written off. If you look at Reserve Bank of India's data, then over the past 5 years, 10,09,000 crores have been written off. Wow, written off. But what does the write-off mean? I will come to that. So 10.09 lakh crores was written off in the last 5 years according to RBI. If you look at the data put up by the minister in Parliament today, and again you will see a chart on my screen. This tells you the write-offs in every year by public sector banks only. This is data for public sector banks. 2017-18, 128 crores. 2018-19, it really goes up. It is 183 crores, comes down a little bit to about 175, then 131, 115, etc. And chances are that they'll be going down. But the fact is that a lot of the money that was owed to the banks has been written off. Now, what does a write-off mean in India? Does a write-off mean that I write it off? Mr. A borrows money from bank run by Mr. B, doesn't pay, bank B writes it off, and then there is no see you later, you go your own way, I go my own way, kuch lena dena nahi hai. It doesn't work like that. What happens is that in the global system, particularly in the Western system, when a bank writes off a loan, bank forgets about it. But that happens in very few cases because those banks are much smarter at figuring out their collateral before they make the lending. So they can recover quite a bit of their value from their collateral. In India, there's been a lot of phone banking in the past. Unfortunately, most of the loans which have gone bad were given in the UPA period. That is a fact. We must be non-partisan and speak the truth. That is a fact, because loans don't go bad a year after they were given or 2 years after they were given. It is only as loans age, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, that they go bad or they have to be written off. So most of these are older loans, and that's why you will find that the write-offs also are coming down and NPAs also are coming down. So in the global system, in the Western system in particular, a write-off is a write-off. You let it go. In the Indian system, a write-off is a technical write-off. What does that mean? That means that today the bank says, I am expecting these loans to come back to me. So they stay on my balance sheet, which means my profit is also fattened by that much because that is not a loss for me. So I am actually paying tax on what will never be my profit, what money I have lost. So banks now have been forced to take a Ganga Snan, which is you've sinned. These are your sins. Ganga mein nahao, dubki lagao, take a holy dip. It cleanses you of your sins. The sins are these bad loans which are then written off. Now, where does the money go? Money doesn't go anywhere because money is not with you. What it does is it basically takes out the mythology from your balance sheets. If you see the minister's statement, he says that this is for healthy banking, etc., but also for tax benefit. So private banks in India make very heavy write-offs because they say, why should I carry the mythology of bad loans, unrecoverable loans on my books and continue to pay tax on higher profits when I can write it off now, take a hit on my balance sheet. My balance sheet also looks nicer because anybody who can read a balance sheet can tell whether what I'm stating is a fact or a mythology. So I look good. At the same time, I pay less tax. But what happens with write-offs in the Indian system is the banks are always chasing this money. And in the course of time, this money keeps coming back. Now, a lot of it doesn't come back, and we've done some analysis for you, and you will see a couple of charts on my screen that will give part of this analysis. Roughly, I would say in the Indian system, in the public sector banks, about 14 to 15% of what the banks write off comes back or has come back in the following 5 years. So see this chart. This is a straight chart, straight screenshot from the minister's statement. One side is the write-offs done by banks each year, and second side is the recovery done by banks each year. So we gave you the data on write-offs each year. See the recoveries on the other side. Now, instead of going into all the banks and cluttering up this presentation, I have taken out 3 key banks. So look at State Bank of India, and I have just done a calculator addition. If you look at State Bank of India, their 5-year write-offs are 2,04,000 crores. 2,04,186. Let's round it off and say 2 trillion rupees. That is what they've written off. Of that, in the same 5 years, they've recovered 41,000 crores, which means about 21% has been recovered. So I'm looking at the 3 biggest banks. Punjab National Bank, they've written off in these 5 years 92,340 crores. They've recovered 14,836 crores, which means about 18%. So a write-off does not mean that the money is gone, it will never come back. Second, what happens when you write off? When you write off, by the time you're writing off something, you've gone through many processes because banks had some collateral. So that collateral is repossessed. Now, the fact is that in many of these loans, collateral was very poor, the banks did not do their job, or there was corruption. For example, the headline story from the minister's statement today is the list of top 50 willful defaulters. If you see those willful defaulters and you see the money is not coming back, you will also know that the banks or the bankers who lent money to them never bothered what their collateral was. For example, what was the collateral for somebody, what was the security for somebody for lending money to Gitanjali Gems? Gitanjali Gems is the top of the pops for willful defaulters, 7,848 crores, followed by ERA Infra Engineering, 5,878, REI Agro, I don't even know what company is, what it does, but it's a willful defaulter of 4,803 crores, and so on and so forth. There's ABG Shipyard Limited, 3,708 crores. In fact, everybody's quote-unquote favorite Vijay Mallya performs very poorly on this list. On the list of 50, he's fifth from the bottom with 866 crores. So if these are willful defaulters, that means banks that lent money to them did not bother looking at their collateral, because with collateral, banks get some money back. They don't get a lot of the money back, because in business, failure is also a part of life. So it's not as if somebody borrows money, the business must be successful and money must come back. Banks take that risk. Some businesses fail and banks lose money or they recover part of their loans. The problem arises when too many businesses don't return the money, not necessarily because the businesses failed, but because money was pilfered, or business plans were not all right, or the bank's collateral was not all right. So the minister's statement tells us that in these 5 years, the banks have also recovered bad loans to the tune of about 4.8 lakh crores. Now, where have those come? Now, some of those have come, as I told you, from recoveries of written off loans. Some of those have come, in fact, quite a lot of those have come through one of the biggest reforms carried out in India's economy. That is the IBC resolution mechanism. What is IBC? That is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. You go bankrupt, you can't return your loans, banks come after you, banks declare you bankrupt, take you to a tribunal, and there your assets are taken out, assets are valued and they are auctioned, and whatever comes back, banks recover their money. So they've been very bad cases where banks have lost 95%, 99% of the money, but they've been also very good cases where banks have recovered all their money with interest. And one of those cases is the SR Group companies, because SR Group in fact was among the most indebted groups in the country. To be indebted is not bad, but to be most burdened with stressed debt or NPAs. And it looked at one point like the entire banking system will collapse under the weight of SR Group's bad loans. But SR Group, on the other hand, was able to sell its assets, that is SR Oil, the big refinery, which is now owned by the Russians, Nayara refinery, their steel plant, everything else that they had built, and in the process, banks recovered all their money with interest. So they are good stories and they are not very good stories. But the fact is that a bankruptcy mechanism is now available. Through this bankruptcy process, 553 cases have been settled, said the minister, and 2.43 lakh crores have been recovered. So, okay, still a lot of money remains stuck in bad loans, but 2.43 lakh crore recovery in 5 years under this new mechanism is not a bad idea. It is a good reform, and this data tells you the impact of this reform. The other thing that's happened is, if you see the data again from this statement, then slippages into NPAs have reduced. What is slippages into NPAs? That is, if your loans this year are this many in the banking system, how many of them will become NPAs, right? Every year some loans will become NPAs. This is real life, right? This is not the perfect world. So that number has reduced. So between 2016-17, in 2016-17, 3,38,710 crores, that is about 3.38 trillion rupees, had gone NPA, had become NPA. Now, 21-22, it was only 1.44 trillion or 1,44,000 crores. So that is good news. Remember, good news is not perfect news. There will always be NPA. As long as there is banking, there will be non-performing assets. But if they come down, that's a very good thing. So once again, what's a write-off? Because everybody is fixated on a write-off. Write-off is primarily an exercise undertaken to clear the bank's balance sheet, I told you. The bank has to say, look, I don't think I can recover this money. And NPA is a dynamic thing. It can change from quarter to quarter. Somebody pays one installment, you are no longer NPA. So you keep coming back from the dead in that case, or you keep coming back from coma in that case. But write-off means when the bank says, look, I don't see a realistic chance of recovering this in time. So the bank writes it off, saying, I'm not going to get this money back, makes a provision in its balance sheet. So balance sheet looks cleaner. It becomes more tax efficient. Also, it becomes more truthful. But when it recovers any part of that money is then written back into the bank's balance sheet and profit and loss account. That then becomes like a bonus for the bank and its shareholders. And that is what's happened in many cases. In fact, when the SR money came back, a lot of the lending banks' balance sheets benefited a great deal as a result of that. So among the questions that the Congress MPs asked, there were a couple of tricky ones that the minister dodged. He did not answer, or he found an excuse. For example, what is the list of all those whose loans have been written off? So the minister said the RBI has no data. Why should the RBI have no data? I don't know. But he said RBI does not maintain data. It doesn't sound convincing, doesn't pass a smell test. Number two, they said that banks cannot disclose these names because of client confidentiality. But banks, in fact, report all of this to the credit information data system. So all write-offs above 5 crores are reported there. So the banking system, the lending system knows. Now there can be an arguable point that, look, if they know, why don't the citizens know? But the fact is, banking is a sensitive profession. Idea of a business failing, the idea of business failure is intrinsic to banking. All banking has to accept some failure. Now, if we started putting every failure to naming and shaming, to an exercise of naming and shaming, nobody will do any business in this country. Nobody would borrow any money in this country. It's not only cheats whose businesses fail. It's also very smart people whose businesses fail despite their best efforts. So naming and shaming, that's my editorial view, is not a solution, but it's an arguable point still. So like all businesses, banking also has a risk. Banking also is a business. It's a risky business. Bankers cover for their risk. We did have a situation where for about a decade, our banks suffered gravely because our bankers had been reckless, maybe in many cases because of phone calls made from Delhi, and that is what had endangered the banking system. Today, I would say, leave politics aside. Today, if you leave politics aside, and it's a good thing that politicians are questioning each other, that the opposition is questioning the government, because if they had not done so, we would not have got this data and this bit of transparency. But to expect that the banks will never have bad loans, the banks will never have NPAs, banks will never have write-offs, that is, I would say, is like seeking the perfect world, which is not possible in any business. What you can conclude from what you have right now is, because the size of Indian banking has gone up greatly, that gross NPAs are still higher than they should still be much lower, but that the movement is in the right direction. Gross NPAs are coming lower year on year, and if they go up somewhere, we'll all keep an eye on it and start complaining about it. And the banking system, if anything, is much stabler, much more profitable than before, and at this point, quite safe.